Hello, YouTube divers. This is Water 122, and I want to welcome you all back to the long-awaited third episode of the history of Western Carolina University. So, last time we saw each other, we talked about the presidencies of Alonzo Carter Reynolds, Hiram Hunter, and Ernest Byrd. And today, we're moving right along in the timeline after such a long gap between videos. I just wanted to get the touring Western Carolina University shorts done and settled with, as well as the Western Carolina touring live stream, which were all done, and now I finished making the script for this episode. So let's go ahead and get this party started. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. So, let's get into it. So, in this episode, we will be discussing the presidencies of Paul Reid, Alexander Powell, Frank Hamilton Brown, and Jack Carlton. Alright, so let's start off by talking about the Paul Reid eras. And I'll explain why there are two eras in just a moment. So, here we go. So the Reid eras occurred during 1949 all the way up to 1968. And there were two of them. Essentially, the Reid eras were split in half, and we'll explain why in a minute. So following the short-lived Ernest Byrd era of WCU, Paul Apperson Reid took over as university president in 1949. The school's expansion absolutely exploded during the Reid era. So many buildings and locations were opened during this time as president. So let's go through everything. So the school's tenure as a teacher's college officially came to an end in 1952, and the school was subsequently renamed to Western Carolina College. And that name would stick all throughout the Reid era, both Reid eras. To kick off the Reid era, we have a new sciences building that was opened in 1952 and was named the Stilwell Sciences Building. The building was named after Edgar H. Stilwell, who was a popular history professor on campus at the time, and was part of the class of 1899. I also brought this up when we toured the Stilwell building on my Touring Western Carolina University series. But Stilwell is currently home to the Mathematics, Geology, Philosophy, and Religion, Political Science, and Communications program. But back in the day, it was home to the school's honors college, and of course, some science classes. And it was also the primary academic building on campus for many years, hosting pretty much every degree program imaginable except for PE, health, and music. Right next door to Stilwell, a new library was constructed in 1953, replacing the original library in Joyner. So this library would be named the Hunter Library, and it is named after President Hiram Hunter. The Hunter Library faced three major renovations in 1968, 1974, and 1983 to become the massive library that is currently on campus today. If you remember from touring Western Carolina University, you know what a Hunter Library looks like right now. The library is a popular research and study hub for students on campus, and it is home to over 500,000 printed resources for students, faculty, and staff to use. This includes anything from books to newspapers to ebooks, research websites, etc. In fact, Hunter Library has its own research page, so there's that. So the Davies Dormitory, originally built in 1910, was officially demolished in the early 50s, and as a result, a new dormitory was built in its place, the Reynolds Dormitory, named after Alonzo Carter Reynolds, the university's second ever president. I mentioned in the episode where we toured Reynolds that it was closed. Now I've finally figured out why it is closed. Reynolds is getting renovated. So Reynolds will no longer be a residence hall, it will be a student life center. And the renovation is set to take place all throughout this current school year and during the 2025-26 school year. So the building won't reopen until my senior year and the fall of 2026. So that's why Reynolds is closed. Um, at the time of making that Reynolds episode, I did not know that. So there's that. Anyways, so as I said, Reynolds still stands, but it is vacant. But when it was a dorm hall, it used to be home of 122 students. And it was the first ever co-ed dormitory on Western Carolina's campus. It also was considered an honors college dorm until the Balsam and Blue Ridge dormitories were opened in the late 2000s. Again, that's just what I've been told. And Reynolds was also the primary housing unit for first year transfer students over at WCU. So there's that. A new gymnasium was constructed in 1956 and it was named after President Reid, which is, as we know today, Reid Gymnasium. Reid Gymnasium took the place of Breese in terms of hosting Western Carolina University basketball games until the Ramsey Center was completed in 1986, and we'll talk about that in possibly the next episode. Anyways, Reid still stands as a secondary gymnasium, and also has a swimming pool. Many of Western Carolina University's indoor intramural and club sports host practices and games there. It's also home to the PE and health and wellness programs at WCU. So if you're majoring in physical education, health education, physical therapy, any type of majors within that field, Reid will be your main hub of study. Also in 1956, President Reid resigned from office briefly due to the death of his wife Madeline, and former President William Ernest Byrd took his place in his absence. This is why the Reid era is technically split up into two different eras, because of the brief resignation that President Reid had in the mid-50s. So once Reid married his new wife Nettie in 1957, he returned to office. And in 1959, another dorm was built just below the hill from Reynolds and Robertson. And it was named after Silva. It was named after the mayor of Silva and the president of the Chamber of Commerce at the time, Harry E. Buchanan. And of course, I'm talking about the Buchanan Residence Hall. So if y'all remember from the Buchanan Residence Hall, I may have mentioned that the building was named after that Harry E. Buchanan was a member of WCU's Board of Trustees. Well, he isn't. He's at the time of the building's construction, he was the mayor of of Cullowhee's neighboring town, Silva, and he was also the president of the Chamber of Commerce for Jackson County, I believe. There's that. The Buchanan Residence Hall officially opened for students in 1959, and Buchanan is also one of those residence halls that inexplicably has no air conditioning or elevators. Thankfully, it's only 3 stories, so there's that. It's another historic piece of WCU's history that still stands and operates to this very day. Many of the buildings on the upper campus side are pretty old and pretty historic. Just a little bit of a point of reference there. 1960 saw the school gain 3 new buildings. An administration building is constructed on the land where the old Dave Rogers house used to stand. And I missed this building when we were talking about the very beginning of the Hunter era in the previous episode. So, the Dave Rogers house was built in honor of Dave Rogers, who was a well-respected farmer from Cullowhee, who sold his farm to the school in 1924. As many of the buildings were being constructed on campus in the late 30s, the Rogers house was destroyed in a fire. And about 21 years later, the Byrd Building was officially opened in 1960 and served as the school's main building for administration for many, many decades. Of course, the Byrd Building is named after the former school president, William Ernest Byrne. A new dining hall was also opened in 1960, and it was named the Brown Cafeteria. The cafeteria building was named after another school alumnus and professor, Frank Hamilton Brown, who we'll mention periodically throughout this episode. Brown Hall was originally built as a cafeteria, but was eventually renovated to host a convenience store, Brown C3. The Cat's Den, which is where 1889 Bistro and Blue Ridge Burger are currently stationed, and Base Camp Cullowhee, which is WCU's outdoor recreation program. Brown went under another massive renovation in 2018, and we'll talk more about that in an upcoming episode. The final building that opened in 1960 was the Home Base headquarters. So Home Base is a student support association that helps support students who have housing problems. They are a collaboration association that consists of Western Carolina University and the Baptist Children's Homes of North Carolina. It was originally known as the Baptist Student Union. They're open to anyone who needs the support, and let me tell you, they are a phenomenal organization. Very nice building, great rooms, and very friendly staff. I didn't talk about that building when we were on the touring Western Carolina shorts because I didn't really think it would be necessary to talk about a professional business on the campus. It's sort of like why I left out the the NC Cat building. If you want to go back to the live stream, I talked about that there. Anyway, so 2 new dormitories were opened in 1962, the Albright and Benton dorms. So Albright and Benton are 2 dormitories that are named after Anne Albright and Alice Benton, respectively. Anne Albright was the Dean of Women at WCC at the time, and Benton had been a professor at the school for 37 years as of when the building was finished. These are 2 separate dormitories that share the same common room building, one of the best common rooms out of all of Western Carolina's dorm halls, if you ask me, and currently serves as an overflow residence hall for freshmen and other undergrad students. The WCC men's basketball team competed in the NAIA National Championship game in 1963, but ended up losing to the Pan American University Bronx by a score of 73-62. 2 seasons later, the school gained its first ever African American basketball player and the first African American basketball player to compete at any predominantly white public school in North Carolina, Henry Logan, a WCU legend. Henry Logan played for Western Carolina College from 1965 to 1968. He was an All-American in every single season he played for the Catamounts, cementing himself as a school legend. He would go on to play professional basketball once leaving WCC and was inducted into the school's Athletic Hall of Fame in 1990 and had his number 10 jersey number retired in 2002, which if you go to a Western Carolina University basketball game now, you'll see his jersey number in the rafters over at Ramsey's Center. So there's that. Logan was also inducted into the North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame in 2000, making him one of the greatest basketball players that the state has ever seen. Not even just in his era, of all time. Staying in 1965, another building was constructed to serve as a K-8 laboratory school for local children and WCC students. The building was named after Cordelia Camp, who was an education professor at WCC from 1927 to 1950. And in these days, the Camp building is host to many offices at WCU, including the Financial Aid Office, the Global Studies Office, the Campus Police Station, etc. Yeah. Then in 1966, a Cherokee ancestral mound was bulldozed in order to make way for construction for another new academic building behind McKee and Hoey Auditorium. The new building was named after Carl Dan Killian, who served as the Dean of College and Education and Allied Professions at the school for 4 decades. The Killian Building currently serves as the main hub for education and psychology programs at WCU, and is even used for classes outside of those respective fields. I know this because I had a math class in that building in the spring of 2024. So there's that. Then, also in 1966, two new residence halls were also completed, the Helder and Leatherwood residence halls. The Helder Residence Hall was named after Horatio Helder, who was an executive at Champion's Paper Company in Canton, North Carolina, which is now closed and abandoned, and also served as a member of WCC's Board of Trustees. He and his wife, Ada, provided scholarships to students who were from neighboring Haywood County, and they were very generous donors for the university. Leatherwood Residence Hall, on the other hand, was named after Thurman and Nell Leatherwood. The Leatherwoods were a super generous couple who provided monetary support to students from Swain County, another neighboring county for Jackson, as well as other students from the mountains. And a new cafeteria was also opened in 1966 and in this same area, the Dodson Cafeteria. So Dodson Cafeteria was named after Clinton F. Dodson, who was a professor at WCC and was the head of the science department. The Reid era concludes with the final name change of the institution. Western Carolina College officially becomes Western Carolina University in 1967 and has remained that way ever since. Also in 1967, the First Lady of the United States, Lady Bird Johnson, attended the ceremony for the first completed renovation of Hunter Library. She attended the ceremony on her way back from visiting Jackson County's Souls Creek and Canada Consolidating School, which was a National Teaching Corps demonstration center in the county. Paul Reid officially retired in 1968, ending an era full of expansions and growth. Under Reid's watch, the school went from a teacher's college all the way up to a university. Now, let's talk about the shorter era of President Alexander Powell. And we'll pause here for just a second. Alright, so now we're moving on to the Powell era. This is a short era that takes place between 1968 and 1972. So let's go ahead and do this. So President Alexander Powell took over once Paul Reid retired from university president. A new university center was opened in 1968. It was known as the A.K. Hines University Center. The building was named after Anthony Keith Hines, who was a former vice president, dean of mathematics, and mathematics professor at WCU. And these days, the University Center, or the UC for short, is the go-to place on campus. It currently has a movie theater, meeting rooms, offices, student organization headquarters, Illusions Club, food court, mostly Einstein's Bagel Bros, a post office, aka the mailroom, and an arcade. Yeah, the UC absolutely rules. It also has a study balcony on the second floor. Also in 1968, a new building was constructed adjacent to Killian, conveniently named Killian Annex. I believe these two buildings are named after the same person. Killian Annex is where many of WCU's student services offices are located, including WCU's Advising Center, where you'll go on advising day to meet with your primary advisor. Office of Accessibility Resources, if you need special like IEP accommodations in any of your classes, they can help you with that. Office of Student Retention, which is home to our MAPS organization, which helps with first-generation students. And the Registrar's Office, who will help you with scheduling classes, and they'll also help you with class withdrawals and late enrollments. A new women's dormitory opened in 1969, the Scott Residence Hall. So this huge residence hall was named after the mother of North Carolina Governor Robert Scott in 1970. and was a dormitory primarily used for women. 1970 also marked a huge year in the school's civil rights advancement as Gail Curtin was dubbed the school's first ever African American homecoming queen. Curtin was also the first African American to win homecoming queen at any predominantly white coeducational school in North Carolina. In 1971, a new building was constructed near the south end of campus, named after Carol Grotness Belk, and her husband, Irwin, or Ike for short, was a North Carolina philanthropist and retailer who helped contribute to the new building's construction, and he also contributed in a new scholarship named after his wife, as well as WCU's first ever catamount sculpture that would be put on display at the new campus entrance for many years in the area where the HFR administration building is. The original catamount sculpture has since moved locations, as we all know, and it currently stands outside of one of the gates at the Ramsey Center, and we'll talk about this in the next episode, in an upcoming episode. Anyways, the Belk Building currently hosts WCU's criminal justice program. Well, I mean, not for long, obviously, because it's going to move up to the Moore Building once it's done being renovated. Criminal justice, construction management, engineering, and stage and screening programs. And it is also where the university's Writing and Learning Commons Tutoring Center is located. And fun fact, WCU's first ever Mountain Heritage Day was celebrated at the Belk Building, too. A new business college was constructed near Killian and Killian Annex in 1971 as well. The Forsyth Building, named after North Carolina State Senator and bank official Frank Forsyth, currently houses WCU's business program. Any type of business majors calls this building home. Another residence hall was opened in 1971. The building was named after William Bunyan Harrell, who was a faculty member of WCU from 1947 up until his retirement in 1966. And these days, Harrell serves as a dorm for primarily first-year students, and is one of the tallest residence halls on campus at 9 stories high. Adjacent to the Scott Hall, another women's dormitory opened in 1972, the Walker Residence Hall. The Walker Residence Hall was named after Edith Walker, a former 4th grade teacher in Cullowhee, and a former WCU faculty member. Together, the Walker and Scott dorms were the largest dorms on campus, housing over 1,100 students in each building. Think about that for a second. President Powell officially stepped down from office in 1972, and Frank Brown took over briefly before the university's next chancellor was elected. Let's talk about the short-lived era for Jack Carlton. So Jack Carlton became WCU's first ever chancellor, and his tenure only lasted a full calendar year. The university was facing some serious turmoil throughout the 1960s and early 70s, mostly due to political and social decisions going on at the time. Chancellor Carlton's era is mainly remembered from a protest event that took place in 1973, where some WCU students marched up to Carlton's house to protest his decisions he made regarding freshman housing and a new academic calendar. The nighttime march up to Carlton's house was the cherry on top of many student-led protests on campus during his tenure. The increased pressure led to Carlton's resignation, and Hugh McHenry, a vice chancellor for academic affairs at UNC Charlotte, briefly took over. McHenry helped rebuild the cooperation and trust on campus in 1973. Unfortunately, McHenry died of a heart attack in 1974, and Frank Hamilton Brown, whom the Brown Cafeteria is named after, continued his work. In 1973, also, the Catamount gymnast Julie Gallagher was named as an NC State runner-up in the floor exercises competition, an essential part of WCU's dominance in women's gymnastics in the early 70s. And with that said, that concludes the third part of the history of Western Carolina University. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is WaterDive122 signing out. Ready to dive and more fun on YouTube. Thank you for watching.